Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So today I thought I'd cover the concept of a backdoor Roth IRA and how that's valuable for your planning, and even if you qualify to do something like this. So the concept of a backdoor Roth IRA combines two moves that you can do with your finances. Number one, it combines funding a traditional IRA, but not taking a deduction, otherwise known as a non-deductible IRA contribution. The second part of this move requires you to do what's called a Roth conversion. And that's where you voluntarily move money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Simply put, if you fund a traditional IRA but you don't take a deduction, when you do the Roth conversion, you would have to pay taxes on all the money you previously didn't pay taxes on in your IRA. Well, if you never took a deduction on the money you put in your traditional IRA, when you go to do the Roth conversion, it won't cost you anything in taxes. And so indirectly, it's a method of funding a Roth IRA while using the non-deductible IRA permitted move and then a Roth conversion, which means that if your goal is to do this during the tax year that you're currently in right now, the deadline to complete the backdoor Roth IRA move is the end of that calendar year. The deadline for funding a Roth IRA directly would be April 15th of the year following the tax year that you're currently in. So how is this valuable? Well, generally, we've all probably heard that if you make over, 200 grand as a family or 120 grand as a single individual, roughly speaking, you're not supposed to directly fund a Roth IRA. There are some ways around that. There's a phase out limit where if you make as a single individual for the tax year of 2021, if you make between 125 grand to 140 grand, if you're in that bracket of modified adjusted gross income, you can fund a percentage of the IRA maximum, which is 6 grand if you're under 50, 7 grand if you're over 50, or you are 50. If you're married and you file jointly with a spouse, the income brackets right there are 198 grand to 208 grand. If you are in that range, again, a percentage of the IRA maximum, you would be allowed to directly fund a Roth IRA with. So simply put, let's assume for this scenario, you're a single individual making over 140, or you're a married couple that makes over $208,000. If that's the case, oftentimes we've also heard that if you're outside of those brackets, then you definitely can't fund a traditional IRA as well. It's actually not true. You can fund a traditional IRA at any time, no matter how much money you make. You're just not allowed to fund a traditional IRA and take a tax deduction. The IRS wants to prevent that. So what do? Well, you can fund a traditional IRA, but not take a deduction at any point. And then you can subsequently do a Roth conversion, where you put money into the traditional IRA, and then you do a Roth conversion to get the money out of the traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. Generally speaking, if you have pre-tax IRA money on the balance sheet, money that you previously took a deduction for, when you do the Roth conversion, you have to pay taxes. And you pay the taxes as if whatever amount you're converting, you took as a bonus for the year from your company or something to that effect. You owe income taxes on that money that you converted. So that's the price of admission. We can get into another time as to why that would be valuable to purposely do Roth conversions. And if you have questions on that, just drop them in the chat below. But the ideal goal in doing this is to help people that are on the high end of those income brackets still get money into a Roth IRA, when otherwise they would be disallowed from directly doing it. So to quickly recap how this move works, you take your IRA maximum, 6 grand if you're under 50, 7 grand if you're 50 or older for the tax year 2021, and you put that money into a traditional IRA, but you don't take a deduction. Then the next day, you do a Roth conversion for that full amount. And the next day, what do you know, 6 grand or 7 grand ends up over in the Roth IRA. You can close the traditional IRA at that point, and you have 6, 7 grand inside of a Roth IRA from here until the day that you pass away, assuming you never spend it. So you have money inside of a Roth IRA growing tax-free until you decide to use the money. All this being said, if you currently have pre-tax IRA money on your balance sheet, maybe an old 401k you rolled over or whatever, Pump the brakes on doing this move directly because there is an IRS caveat that I want you to be aware of called pro rata conversion rules. And I want to explain that in just a quick second. In the meantime, though, let's cover a quick example. Let's assume for the sake of this example, you're a single individual making over 140 grand modified adjusted gross income, or you're a married couple making over $208,000, again, modified adjusted gross income. How would you make this work? Well, first step is you'd open up a traditional IRA. So your traditional IRA opened up over here. Second step is you open up a Roth IRA. Then you send your IRA maximum contribution, in this case, it'd be 6 grand, into the traditional IRA, but you do not take a deduction. No deduction is taken on that money. When you fund an IRA, generally you're not saying whether it's deductible or non-deductible. You'll handle that on your tax return whenever you file. Then you conduct a Roth conversion and you convert 6 grand over into the Roth IRA, Roth conversion. Now you have 6 grand inside your Roth IRA. And in this case, you would have nothing over here at that point. And that's how you get money inside the Roth IRA. And that's a simple visual as to how to get money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA in order to conduct this. And again, the reason we would do it this way and not directly fund the Roth IRA is because at any point you're allowed to directly fund a traditional IRA. Whether or not you can fund a traditional IRA directly and take a deduction, that's going to be dependent on your modified adjusted gross income levels and whether or not you have access to a 401k that you could otherwise fund directly. Now, there is an IRS rule that I want you to be aware of, and it's called the pro rata rules. What pro rata refers to is essentially the portion of your account that is non-deductible and a portion of your account that you've never paid taxes on. You can't pick and choose which of those portions you want to do a conversion for. So let's jump into an example, probably easier to see. Let's say you are somebody that has existing traditional IRA money on the balance sheet. So you've got your traditional IRA over here, and let's say that that is a byproduct of an old, maybe 401k rollover you did from a previous employer a few years ago. And let's say there's $94,000 in there, just to keep it super simple, right? And then let's say you want to do this backdoor Roth IRA strategy. So what do? You put 6 grand into your traditional IRA. That's what you can fund for the tax year 2021. And then you open up your Roth IRA and you get ready for that Roth IRA to catch your Roth conversion proceeds. Your total account balance over here is 100 grand. Now, according to the IRS, you have to employ what are called the pro rata conversion rules. What that refers to is this mixing up that the IRS does inside of your IRA. And what they do is they take the total amount you have, 100 grand, and they basically divide it into percentages. So simply put, of your 100 grand, 94% of that 100 grand, you've never paid taxes on. 6%, you have paid taxes on. You just made the contribution right there, 6 grand. So unfortunately now, if you were to do a Roth conversion, 94% of what you try to Roth convert will be subject to tax, 6% will not. So as a simple example, if you thought, hey, I'm going to get away with doing a backdoor Roth IRA, I put in 6 grand over here, and now I'm going to Roth convert 6 grand over here. That $6,000, 94% of that is going to be subject to tax. 6% will not. And so simply put, if you were to do a $6,000 conversion, 6,000 times 0.94, $5,640 would be subject to taxable income, as if you were just doing a regular old Roth conversion. You weren't trying to do something fancy like this. 6% of that is tax-free, so that's nice. Unfortunately, you don't get to choose which portion of your traditional IRA that you're converting. You have to mix it all up together. Let's say it's the tax year 2021, and in 2022, you'd like to do a backdoor Roth conversion. What's your workaround? Well, you have existing traditional IRA money on the balance sheet, and that's going to block you from doing this, assuming you didn't want to pay any taxes on a Roth conversion. One workaround is you take all of your IRA money that you have on the balance sheet and you move it into your company-sponsored 401k plan. Most companies will allow you to do something like that. It's just an IRA rollover directly into your 401k. Now, these 401ks, companies like Fidelity, Vanguard, Edelman, et cetera, they would love to manage more money for you. So generally, they're not going to have a problem with you doing that rollover. I have been given feedback that it's best to break this move up into 2 years, where in the first year, you get all the pre-tax money off your balance sheet. You roll it all into your 401k. The next year, the shackles are off and you can do a backdoor Roth conversion for where in this example, you'd wait until the tax year of 2022, and then you do your first ever backdoor Roth contribution. My gut tells me that if you were to do it all in the same year, the IRS would jumble all that together, though you had no pre-tax money in the balance sheet when you did the conversion. For the tax year, you still had pre-tax money. That's the feedback I've been given from CPAs. So hope that was helpful as far as a quick rundown as to how you would make this work. If you have questions, again, drop them in the chat or send a message. Would love to answer anything you have. And hopefully this is helpful as you're doing your end of year planning. As always, have a good rest of your day. Share this with anybody that you think will be relevant for. Talk to you later. Bye.